Hello. Welcome. This is an official church conference that has been approved by the district superintendent and have been announced in a due fashion. And so, on behalf of the church and as the appointed elder of Asbury First, I bring this church conference officially to an open. Can we open with a word of prayer? Gracious and loving God, we ask your wisdom, your grace, your courage, and your hope as we find our way forward, as we try and navigate this strange new world that we're living in, and as we try to continue your hard work through this congregation of your holy church. I ask a special blessing upon all of the people who are watching in this moment with uncertainty in their lives, that through our work today and the work of this church going forward, we might do our best to offer a little more hope in what sometimes feels like a hopeless world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Friends, this is admittedly a strange moment to try and pull together all of these disparate pieces into our church conference. I appreciate you staying on, and we will be putting up information for you about how to participate within this service, about all of the ways in which you might engage. And if you haven't seen the email, it is to go to slido.com, slido.com, and enter the code VOTE Asbury. That's going to come up several times, and we're not there yet. And if you've done so, and you are seeing a screen that says there are no active polls at this time, or actually it's up right now, you will know that that's there. Now, we're not going to publish the results of those, and we'd ask that you wait to vote until we have a chance to actually share with you what it is that we're trying to do here, but you should see that on that screen now. Let me just start by clarifying what we are doing and what we aren't doing. Here's one challenge we're facing. There is no provision in the Book of Discipline for virtual voting. That said, the Council of Bishops, our Episcopal leader, and the district superintendent have recommended that all church conferences, until the pandemic is done, will be conducted virtually. So, what does that mean long term? How does this hold up in a court of law? I have no idea. So here's what our commitment to do is. Everything we vote on today is provisional. Next month, on January 24th, when we have our church conference, our annual meeting to vote on the budget and the nominations report, that will also be provisional. We will function as though they are in place, but we will wait until the moment in which we are all able to be back together again, whenever that is, in a full church conference in person to ratify everything that has happened. For today, I think that offers a little bit of relief, recognizing that there's still a lot of questions about how this might work. In a moment, I'm going to invite forward Valerie Benjamin, who's the chair of the governance task force that has been meeting for the last couple of years. But before we do that, I want to just take a moment to remind us of how we got to this moment and perhaps why we're doing it now. So let's just start with the dreamscape, which when I first became senior minister back in 2015, all those years ago, we began a process of dreaming together as a congregation. Everyone was able to share some of their dreams, whether they were 3 or 93, and we put those all up on a board. We worked over the course of a couple of years as a congregation to sort those out, to see where there was affinity between those dreams. And then we worked with a team, a strategic team that pulled all those pieces together and articulated our mission, our vision, our values as a congregation, and then set some goals. And the last goal, 7.3, was that our structure and systems are organized in a missionally effective way. The church council heard that request as it was shared from the congregation, and you voted upon it as a congregation to move forward with this being a goal. And so we have done so. We've tried to carry out the hard work set before us in trying to think about what it would mean to have a system and structure that is missionally effective and that is organized to best enable us to live out our mission and vision as a congregation. I want to say a special thank you to everyone who started by reading Inside the Large Congregation by Susan Beaumont, to everyone in leadership who then read Governance and Ministry by Dan Hotchkiss, To the 80 or so people who came to that weekend in October of 2018 as we had our retreat to work on governance and ministry, to the church council who then put forward this task force, and to all of the members who have served on this task force over the last couple of years. Valerie Benjamin and Dawn Reedy served as our co-chairs. We recognize that Dawn is not here today, but she has been involved in every piece of this process up until the pandemic began. Given the nature of her job, we recognize that she was not able to continue in this particular moment. Mary Warboys-Turner, Beth Rice, Al Sweat, Chuck Hanrahan, Deb Bullock-Smith, and David Strong also served on this committee. And so for those keeping track at home, that represents the last 3 chairs of church council, 2 current trustees, the chair of finance, 2 members of the staff, and a member of the staff parish relations committee. In other words, this committee had representatives from all of those current administrative groups and certainly enough lived experience to recognize where we are succeeding and where perhaps we have some opportunities for growth. We also thank all of those committees, the church council, the trustees, the staff parish relations committee, and the finance, who have offered us feedback as we've gone along and been able to share that. We have received so much feedback, and it has been helpful to us as we continue to refine and make sense of who we are and where we are. In just a moment, I'll invite Val Benjamin forward at this time, and that she might share with us. But I will just say before we get to that piece that in a second I'll help describe exactly how this is going to work. But Val will come forward now and share with us some of the learnings that we have found in the task force. Val.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, I guess, depending on where you are participating with us and where in the world you're participating with us. I just have to say it is fantastic to be back in this room. I have been certainly appreciative of all of the work that has gone into producing the very excellent live streams, but truly nothing can match the majesty of being back in this place we love so much, and I hope we'll be able to do it again very soon. Thank you so much also for your time and attention as we seek to move forward with a vote on the new church governance structure. I think Stephen said quite a bit about kind of where we've gotten to. This is not an effort that we have gotten into lightly. It was October of 2018 when I agreed, along with 75 or 80 of my friends, to spend the weekend at a little church, I believe it was in Fairport, to learn a little bit more about how best practice congregations are structured. One of the things that we realize here at Asbury First United Methodist is that we have an awful lot going on. We have an amazing amount of complexity. We have an incredible amount of talent. Stephen went through all of the talent that was reflected on our task force, and that is just the tip of the iceberg of the commitment and the skills and the service that we have at our disposal here at Asbury First United. One of the things that we did as we talked to members of the congregation, whether that be the trustees or the council or the SPRC or the outreach committee or others, was that we really want to make sure, everyone really wanted to make sure that we were following everything that we could do to help people be more focused on doing the ministry and the passion, the things that they loved doing as a part of their life in this church, and have less focus on navigating the bureaucracy. And we received many thoughtful observations about where that can hold us back. And so that, in turn, over a period of several months, turned into a governance model that we put together, which sought to make sure that there were clear lines of delineation from the ministry teams, the work that is being done in the teams, which is out in the community, and then the governance that is being done on paper in conjunction with the senior minister. So what we discovered, and we've provided an awful lot of information on that on the website, as well as in conversation with hundreds of members of the congregation. So we put together an overall mapping and ministry organizational structure, which would take the current trustees and the current church council and essentially combine that into one body called the governing board, of which the senior minister would be a part of, and that board would then hold the senior minister accountable for the strategy, the policies, and the day-to-day operations of the staff. The senior minister will also, in some sense, give up a little bit of the scope that is afforded to the senior minister via the discipline, in that we will collaboratively and with the voice of the congregation, given that the board members will be elected by the congregation, we will collaboratively come together to craft that strategy, to look at the go-forward plans, to review the operating model, to make sure that we're adhering to our budget and doing all the due diligence that our congregation demands of us. The congregation, I think it's important to mention, will ultimately be the leader, as they have always been, of how things get done around here. The congregation, by virtue of how they feed back up to the board, the fact that they will be elected by the board, will have the ultimate oversight in the life of the church. During the course of these conversations, I've had countless amazing conversations with folks who had ideas about, what are the things that are going to be important? What would success look like should we decide to move forward with this operating model? Those conversations were rich, they were highly discerned, and they were profound. We have kept all of the thoughts and all of the perspectives of the committed members of the congregation, and I thank them, because it will allow, should we move forward, it will allow this board membership to really hit the ground running and make sure, as they're looking at the detailed way that they want to structure and operationalize this model, that they have a clear understanding of what's important to the members of the congregation. I'd like to speak on that for just a couple minutes here now before we go to the vote. So this is what we heard loud and clear from folks. Number one, we want to make sure that we are continually making sure that we are establishing the correct boundaries with regard to the authority of the senior minister. So the minister will still be appointed by the bishop. Everything that happens in terms of performance management and operations will be adhered to via the Book of Discipline. And most importantly, the SPRC or the PPRC will still remain the vehicle for performance management. The board will also provide strategic and executive guidance to the senior minister. So it'll be a collaborative conversation. Another thing that was very important to the folks I talked to were mechanisms to provide transparency for the voice of the congregation, and that did not go amiss. I think if there's one thing that we've learned in the pandemic, is that we have been challenged to provide many and different ways to communicate with the congregation that frankly we didn't have to in our pre-pandemic world. We've learned a lot. We will keep those ways of communicating to make sure that voices can be more directly heard and easily heard through a variety of channels, whether they be voice-to-voice or whether they be virtual. We also will challenge ourselves to make sure that every board member understands, and indeed it's outlined in the policy book that goes along with the model, that they are representatives of the congregation and it is their responsibility to speak to the issues and the viewpoints that are most important to our broader membership. And then finally, the other thing that we heard loud and clear, and we'll go into the discernment as we should we move forward with this model, is that strength and diversity in perspectives of this governing board is and should be at the forefront. So after the vote, once we decide the tenor of the congregation, the next step would be to bring forward a nominating committee. And one of the charges of that nominating committee will be to establish selection criteria, to say what are the complement of skills that are important to make this board successful. They'll put together that process. They will get feedback from the overall congregation on what those traits look like, and we will make sure we're transparent in terms of the decision-making process for whoever would become the inaugural board. So those are really 4 main themes. There were a lot of other great ideas, more than I could possibly go into during the time that I'm sure you would like me to talk. But rest assured, this has been a phenomenal experience for me. It's been one of the most affirming experiences I've had at this church. The members of the task force that I've worked with have been, to a person, just wonderful in terms of the care and commitment they have exhibited to the life of this church. And then finally, the thought leadership that we've brought in, not only from the staff and from members of our conference, but tapping into the best and brightest thinking across the denomination has been wonderful as well. So I hope you will agree. And at this point, I think I'll turn it back over to Stephen so we can talk a little bit about voting. Thank you.
And a special thank you to Val, as she's done such hard work, especially in the last few weeks, as we've heard lots of feedback from people, good feedback, and we've used it and written it all down, and I think we've done our very best to respond person by person as they've come. Just now, we're moving to the actual vote itself. So a couple of things. We have always operated on the basis, or always, I would say, at least in my time here, we have operated in church conferences on big matters that we won't move forward unless there is a 2/3 majority vote. I still plan to honor that today. So my hope, my prayer, is that we will have at least a 2/3 majority vote. We'd also recognize that in this moment, because this is an official church conference, only people who are officially members of the congregation should vote. I have no way of knowing that. If you put your name down, we can check that against the registry, and because this is a strange model and this is provisional by its very nature to be ratified at a later date, I think we're going to have to trust in your honesty and God's grace in this moment as we find our way through. So we are looking for a 2/3 majority vote, and we are looking for members to be the ones that are voting. I think the benefit of this way is that it allows us to operate with a kind of trial run of this new governance model, a new governance board, so that we can see how it works. And by the time that we're able to get together, my prayer is within 6 months, we can vote again in person, and at that point we can put forward whatever amendments we might need. Nothing is permanent save the grace of God, and so we trust that we will find our way forward as we move forward with this. That said, on the screen now you should see both the QR code for how to connect as well as where to go, slido.com. And all you have to do is enter Vote Asbury. Now, if you have multiple people in your household who are members and are able to vote, we suggest that you use 2 different devices. If you're having to use the same computer, we would recommend 2 different browsers. If you can't do that, just email us to questions@asburyfirst.org, and we will count your vote in the totals. Again, this is a provisional vote. We can't... We recognize that it may not end up holding up in a court of law, but we know that we don't want to move forward unless we have the sense of the congregation, and so we trust that you move forward, as this has been the recommendation of our Council of Bishops, of our own bishop. It's how annual conference happened this year, and so we will find our way forward trusting in this process. This is a provisional vote. It is a vote that will be ratified the next time we're together with the actual amendments that might be necessary. And so, with prayerful thought, we'd ask that you take a moment now to vote. We're going to give it a few minutes, recognizing that there are going to be people out there who might have some challenges. We want to honor those. And certainly if it turns out at the end of this we only have a few people there, we will look to, I can't see the full results, but it looks affirming in the moment. Are we? Okay, 74 votes so far. We will perhaps wait to show the full total until we close out the poll in a couple of minutes or so. I was just going to say, certainly if we only had a few people out there, 10 people, like at the end of one of my sermons, that perhaps we would have to reconsider how we do this. But if there are enough people, and it does appear that right now I'm showing that we have 104, 107 who have 108, 9, keeps going up. That's sort of interesting. The number of people who are voting. So thank you. We're glad to know that there are people out there and able to vote. I can't vote because I am not a member of this congregation. And this is just my attempt to fill some space, but give you a little understanding of how the discipline works. I'm a member of the annual conference, which means I'm appointed to Asbury First. And so this is who I am. I don't get to vote, but my wife, Emily, my beloved wife, whom you might see next week in a spot very similar to this, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, we will have a chance to, she will have a chance to vote. So far, we have 133 people who have voted, at least according to my 136. And I'm praying that if we have questions that I don't know if we've received any questions yet, and others that we might add into the mix. So far, we have 150 votes, and I will give it one more minute, and then we'll close out the voting. Following this section, we will close out the official portion of the church conference and remain here for those interested as I just offer some updates on some of the various and myriad challenges the church is facing in this moment. I think we are close to the 1 minute mark. Deb, can I respectfully ask that we close out the poll? Okay, and can we get the final total? There are 166 votes, with 89% saying yes and 11% saying no. The motion passes. I will say this, that I recognize there are 11% of people who said no to this, and it matters to us that we are able to address some of your concerns. So if you are one of those people in the 11%, or you voted yes, but you had some concerns, please know that we would love to hear them. So if you want to send your concerns to questions@asburyfirst.org, it doesn't have to be today. In the next few weeks, if you can take a moment to write down some of those questions, we as the governing task force, as we move into a new position, will do our very best to try and take those into account. And certainly the new board, as it comes into being, will do their best to take that into account. I want to thank everybody who participated in this today. I recognize it's a strange way to have to try and do these things, but such is the moment in which we're living in. With that said, we will formally close this portion of the meeting. Thank you. And with that portion of the meeting closed, I thought I would do a few things. If you keep that Slido poll open, it should switch now in just a moment to come up. If you'll see at the top of your screen, there's a new section that says Q&A. So if you click on that, you can type your question in there. We're not going to post them just for a moment. What I'd ask is that you allow me for just the indulgence of going through some of the myriad challenges our church is facing right now. I can give you an update, and then I'm happy to afterwards answer as many questions as is reasonable in the time that we have together. There are 6 different areas that I thought would be appropriate to update you on, though they're certainly not the only things the church is facing right now. Let me start in the macrocosm level at the denomination. Some of you know that the General Conference of the United Methodist Church was supposed to meet in May. I was to be a delegate to that conference along with some other members of our congregation. That, because of the pandemic, rightly so, had to be delayed. It was delayed until the late August, early September of 2021. It's at that moment in which the conference will vote on the protocol, which would allow for those members of the denomination who cannot abide by a denomination that is fully inclusive of gay and lesbian persons to form another denomination. So the idea is that the protocol for the United Methodist Church, which as it's being dubbed, is an agreed upon document by conservatives and progressives alike, as well as centrists, who are trying to find a way forward out of the quagmire in which we currently find ourselves. That would mean that if it passes at the General Conference, that any church, that by default we would be in a church that would be open and inclusive. So we at Asbury First, I would imagine, would not vote to leave, but every church would have the right to vote to leave to go into another, what's called the traditional United Methodist Church, or whatever the name is that they will give themselves as they form that new denomination. The challenge, of course, is that given the nature of the pandemic and where we are, certainly with more than a third of our delegations coming from outside of the United States, visas, along with other complications of the pandemic, may end up delaying that further. I will continue to keep you informed as we know more, but the truth is it has taken a back seat to some of the more pressing issues that are facing the denomination and individual churches at this time. Second, I thought I would just update you on the racial justice advocacy work. As you have seen, the staff leaders and the pastoral leaders of the congregation have committed to continue the work of racial justice, both within our own lives and ourselves looking in the mirror, but also within the congregation and in the greater Rochester area. I want to thank the racial justice advocacy group that has been pulled together and the great leadership of David Carr and Brennan Thompson, who are our lay leaders, and the staff leadership that has been provided at her request by Jackie Nelson. We are grateful for the work that has been done, and we ask that you continue to look forward towards all of those, the reporting that will come out from those various groups. I want to thank everybody who took part in the 21-day Equity Challenge, which was a part through the Rochester, I blanked on the term, but it came through the Rochester, sorry. Yeah, that's okay. It was the 21-day Equity Challenge. Sometimes you can't hold on to everything in your head. So I want to thank everybody who participated in the 21-day Equity Challenge. I would say that for myself, the United Way, thank you, the Greater Rochester United Way had sponsored it, and we participated in it as a staff and have found great insight as we've worked together to think through what those are. And we recognize that there are members of the congregation who were involved in a small group that helped process some of that, and thank you to Bob Peck for his leadership in that as well. I want to give you an update about the lawsuit that the church is facing. Some of you know that a claim was brought under the Child Victim Act case against the church in regard to the conduct of former senior minister Ray Fedge. I put out a statement about that on June 9th. It is available on our website right now. As I said in that statement, I was not even born at the time that this happened, but I have no reason to doubt the validity of the claim, and for that I am truly sorry. And so I'd ask that you would join me in praying for the survivor, as well as for our congregation as we continue the process of mediation and we do our very best to find some kind of just resolution. Unfortunately, I can't really speak more to that, and I recognize there may be other questions there, but rest assured that we have been working as your church leadership to do our very best to respond with grace in this moment that is very challenging. I want to give you an update about the financial outlook of the church. First, I want to say I'm most appreciative to everyone who's been able to sustain their contributions throughout the course of this year. While we recognize contributions have been lower than they would be in a normal year at this time, we also recognize that our expenses we have been able to keep low as well, as we've done our very best to change and to adapt as this year has caused us to change and adapt. I think there's something to celebrate in that the COVID Relief Fund through the Pastor's Discretionary Fund generated $70,000 from your generosity as a congregation, and we have used it all to support the ongoing needs of the Rochester community, and those needs are only growing. In particular, as the eviction notice or the eviction delay was relaxed, we have faced an onslaught of people who are in between a rock and a hard place, where they've lost unemployment benefits, and now they're about to lose their homes or their apartments. And so we've done our very best to help in any way that we can. We have some challenges ahead. There was a question about whether or not we were able to take the PPP loan, and we were at the time, which helped us sustain our staffing levels. That's one of the contingencies of, or one of the requirements of accepting the PPP loan, and it was able to help sustain us through a moment when income was lower as a congregation. Going into 2020, though, we have a fairly significant challenge that we are going to meet. We recognize that we've done our very best to hold our budget flat year to year. We have that, and we've accomplished that to try and hold on to our budget. And so thank you to those who are able to continue their contributions for next year, and especially to those who are able to increase. It helped offset those who, for various reasons, had to decrease their pledge for the year ahead. The challenge, though, of course, with holding a budget flat is that expenses shift. One of the things we've just recently learned is that Epilepsy Prelude, who has made use of our space over the last few years, can no longer sustain being in another location. And so that means a difference of about $60,000 that we have to make up. In addition to probably $20,000 of other space usage, that's about $80,000. And we're facing an increase from the conference apportionment, the shared giving, of about another $20,000. All told, that's about $100,000 that we are trying to figure out how in the next year we will adjust on a flat budget. Certainly, we will continue to keep you informed as we do our best to make the best decisions we can as we find our way forward in that. Look for more information, certainly, in the weeks ahead. And finally, and it's the elephant in the room as it has been all year, before I get to that, excuse me, I missed one, which is just to say, look for more information about the capital campaign at the January 24th meeting. I'm proud to say that we have raised over $340,000 through 11 foundations, and we continue to be working with other foundations. We recognize that the need for the Outreach Center is now more acute than ever. And so our prayer is that we can do a final push in the new year to close the final gap and get to the place we need to be so that perhaps we can break ground in the fall. We recognize that the needs are only increasing, and as we've heard from institutions around our city, and certainly from our civic leaders, they look to us to help lead in these moments. We will do our best to continue to update you, and as I said, look for more information at that January 24th meeting, and at which point we will share a little bit about our hopes for the new Outreach Center of 1010. And finally, as I said, the elephant in the room, of course, has been COVID. Here we are, 9 months in, continuing to try and find our way. My prayer had been that we would be back by now. I remember when this first started, we were saying, I wonder if we'll be back by Easter, and here we are, almost to Christmas, and we're still not present in the same space as a congregation. But I hope you recognize that we have been present with each other throughout this entire time. We've had to make really hard decisions, and decisions between two bad choices. We've decided to remain virtual for this period because we still believe in the value that was set forward in our dreamscape of being open to all, and we recognize that there is some value in everybody experiencing this in the same way. That said, in the year ahead, we hope that we will obviously begin to welcome people back into our worship space. We're looking for creative ways to make that work, though we don't know exactly how or when we can do that now. We had hoped perhaps at the start of the year that would be possible, but given that we're now in the orange zone and perhaps at some point we'll find our way into the red zone, we recognize that we may have to delay in how we do that. Though our hope is to phase back. As we look forward, however, we recognize this is going to mean some changes for us as a congregation. As I prepared the staff, I recognize that it may mean we never again have more people in the sanctuary than we do with us virtually. My prayer is that it means we have full sanctuary and many, many more people who are watching with us, both in this community and especially around the country and around the world. We don't want to lose that. And so as we come back into our sanctuary, as we hope to do in the next couple of months, we are going to look for ways to continue to include people who are watching with us virtually. We're going to try and find ways to be able to see them from time to time. I think many of you, as you've expressed to me, and certainly it has been meaningful to me, have appreciated over the course of the last few months, and especially during the season of Advent, being able to see people from around the world, being able to see people from around our community in a short little video snippet. In order to do that in our sanctuary, we need some mechanism to be able to see that. And while I recognize it may be the most controversial thing I've ever done as a senior minister at Asbury First, it is the moment where it's time for us to consider, so that we can include those people who can't be with us in the sanctuary, for us to consider how we might put some tastefully done monitors within the sanctuary. It's been an honor to serve as your senior minister as I share that with you. But I will just say this, there are other places, the National Cathedral, St. Patrick's Cathedral, who have beautiful Gothic spaces like ours and who have managed to do so tastefully, and we will find our very best way to do that as we move forward. Our hope is to do so that we can include those people who may not be able to come and worship with us in person as we find our way forward. I believe that is the end of all of the pieces that I wanted to make sure to speak with you about, and now I'm ready to take your questions. There's some from Andrew. Thank you for all the work on governance, congregational safety, and conscientiously continuing meaningful worship. How can members help you in these efforts? Thank you. I would say we could use your prayers, all of us. I think the staff will affirm that, and I will certainly say, I'll just speak for myself. I would say these have been the hardest 9 months of ministry of my entire career. And I love this church, and I love my job. It's hard to constantly be having to make decisions that you know are between two bad choices. As I joked during the town hall meeting over the summer, I've heard leadership described before as disappointing people at a rate they can handle. And while I always laughed at that, it has never felt more true than in the last 9 months. And so I guess I would say I would covet your prayers. And I'd ask not just for me, but for the other members of this staff whom I'm so proud of and who I'm so grateful for, because they have worked so hard and turned on a dime to make this work as a congregation. So thank you to all who are out there. Thank you for your prayers. And if I come up with another question or another way of where you might be able to help us, I will let you know. Question from Dave Kennedy: what's our status with Mike? Some of you know that in the spring, Mike Mullen was removed from candidacy in the United Methodist Church as the District Committee on Ministry did not feel that his theology aligned with the United Methodist Church. He's been in a process of appeal for that, and we have advocated on his behalf there, but we have not moved forward. We have not been able to move the dial at any level for that. So we are working with the conference and working with the SPRC to consider how we might respond to that. But as of right now, the status in terms of the conference has not changed for Mike. I will say that in terms of as a member of the staff, the only difference is that he does not use the title Reverend in front of his name. He continues to operate fully as our Minister for Discipleship and Youth, and we expect that he will continue to do so for that purpose. A question from Gary Brown: why vote on this now? In case it hasn't been clear that from the things that I shared with you, we are facing some challenges as a congregation, and we need a moment. We need the help of a group to be able to help consider those challenges. We worked on the governance task force plan for 2 years, and we were just getting ready to roll it out to vote in June so that we could have meetings in March and in April and in May. And of course, the world turned on its head. We have no idea when all of this will end. Our prayer, of course, is that it will end sooner rather than later. But the truth is, we need something to change now in order to be able to make the best decisions we can to carry out the mission and vision of this congregation. We could have waited until the spring or until next year, but the truth is, we need the help now. And I think as all of the current members of the board have affirmed, the current members of the church council have affirmed, it's time for a change. And this allows us to do this as a trial run to see what we learn along the way. And that would be my answer to that. Are there other questions that people have, either by submitting them to questions at Asbury First or on the screen? I'm not seeing any other questions, and so perhaps I'll just end with this. Our conversation doesn't stop now, and though we are not necessarily doing it in a formal way, I pray that you have always experienced me and my commitment to you as I continue in leadership for as long as I'm able to do so, that I will be open and remain open to your questions and concerns. Don't hesitate to reach out. If something sounds a little strange, perhaps we're just misunderstanding what it is that's actually being shared. And so I pray that we will find our way forward as a congregation. I'm grateful to each and every one of you for the ways that you have cared for each other, that you have shared with each other, and I'd ask that you continue to do so in this moment. I so look forward to not staring into a camera each Sunday morning. I cannot wait to have people back in the pews. We're going to do so as safely as we can and as hopefully and fully as we can and as soon as we can in a way that makes sense. I see there's one more question. Thank you for providing such meaningful and relevant services. No, I missed it. Hold on a second. See if I can update it on mine. Meaningful, relevant services. Knowing that we are all in this together has made this so much easier. Thank you, Teddy. I agree with you. From somebody named Robert, did I understand correctly that our apportionment has increased by $20,000 for 2021? That you did hear correctly, though I have a meeting this week with the treasurer and the Conference Council on Finance Administration, as well as with the bishop, in order to see whatever I can do to help make that not be the case. Because whatever you're thinking, I agree. With that said, perhaps we can close with a word of prayer. Gracious God, we give you thanks for the work that is done, for the work that is being done, and for the work that will be done. Thank you for your grace that surrounds us and for the hope that this community and this congregation has provided. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, friends. God be with you until we meet again.